All right. It's a Monday night at the Voice of College Football. And guess what? I guess it's a Monday night just about everywhere. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. And we are looking forward to our conversation with Tony Altimore discussing college football expansion and realignment, the myths, the rumors, and more so for me. I would love to know what the strategies are concerning what the possibilities and the probabilities are. We will have Tony on in just a second. Gather your thoughts out there, your comments, your questions, leave them in the live chat. And also we'll be taking calls a little bit later once Tony lays the groundwork. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Always keep in mind that the Amazon link's in the description section of all the videos. So please put it somewhere where you will remember it. Grab that link when you do your Amazon shopping. It's the same shopping experience. It will help us grow the channel. We've got another power-packed week here at the Voice of College Football. It kicks off here right now with Tony, and then a little bit later tonight, we're on board with our buddy Matt Zemek of Trojans Wire, talking USC football live over on the USC channel. Tuesday, of course, we've got Iowa Live, Nebraska Live, and we also make our weekly appearance on the Michigan podcast with our buddy Steve Dace. So check out that as well. And I won't take you through the rest of the week, but that gets you set up for the next couple days. We posted a video earlier today looking at we won't call it our way too early top 25, because I know that there were way too early top 25s even before the season ended for 2022. I got mine out, the segment out this morning. Please give it a look. And again, we call it our pre-spring practice. Way too early top 25. There it is. And I really want to put together a video that I've been talking about in regards to the unpredictability of each college football season. And that seems to be even more so the situation entering 2023. You might be surprised to know that there were 27 teams in the Power 5. So there's 65 Power 5 teams. 27 of those 65 last season in 2022 had either at least a 3-game increase in wins or in losses last season. So that's pretty substantial when you think about it. Look at the standings. Go look at the standings for the college football season of 2022 and try to figure out which teams and how many teams, let's say 20 to 25. I've been looking at this each and every season. Once I noticed that some of the big power brokers in the sport in regards to magazine publications, those preseason publications that we all run to in June and July, Street and Smith's, Athlon's, those various publications, how conservative they are in predicting the next season. And so I started to match their predictions and their projections for win totals and records versus the actual difference versus the previous season. And what I found was most of the publications only projected about 5 or 6 teams to have a significant, or what I defined as significant, at least 3-game difference in win-loss record from the previous season, when in fact, the reality was at least in roughly 17 to 22 teams, each season would have that much of a difference in record. And last season, it was up to 27 teams, which is pretty remarkable. So I am basically warning all of you that my predictions this next football season might be what you consider out there, because there are probably going to be, again, it's almost like clockwork now, about 20 teams in the Power 5. Out of those 65, a third of the Power 5 will have that significant of a record difference from last season. Coach Prime, we're looking at you. I think you might be at the top of the list in regards to candidates to have a significant record change in 2023. Purdue, unfortunately, I'm looking at you as well. So those are the first two that come to mind. And again, we will break that down here in the next few weeks. All sorts of ideas for off-season content that we will deliver to you, of course. You can expect our coaches' rankings to be coming out soon. I always run down my top 10 non-conference games, best non-conference matchups. I'll deliver that at some time soon. Also, I like to take that a step further and go through my underrated or under the radar best non-conference matchups for 2023. We will deliver those as well. Also, maybe some power rankings for each conference now that we've made it through a full recruiting cycle, transfer portal season. So those power rankings in the off season are actually more, I wouldn't call them more legitimate, but more flexible, more based on actual personnel moves than they have been in previous seasons with what we've seen again in the transfer portal. I will survey your comments and questions while we wait for Tony, and Tony's going to deliver as he always does. He is the expert when it comes to all of this, because it is just phenomenal. For the first time in bringing Tony on the show, I got to think it's been about a year and a half ago, something in that range, that Tony then became the resident expert, and who knows how long he was the resident expert out there before we became fortunate enough to get in touch with Tony and bring him on here on a regular basis. Tony, how you doing today?
Sorry, we're trying to sort out some minor technical issues here. Getting everything set. Just one.
Tony, if you need me to continue on, we can. No, I'm trying to figure out
why. Okay, I see what's going on. All right, well, let's. Shall we get rolling?
Yeah, we can get rolling. I want to give you a proper introduction here, though. Of course, this is Tony Altimore. You see there, Voice of College Football, USC, and Pac-12 hosts. But in addition to that, of course, first and foremost, a strategy consultant. And that's where we first found Tony. And we're so pleased that we did, because this is just great stuff to dig through. And this is a learning workshop for all of us. Tony, we've heard so many rumors, so many possibilities and potential scenarios out there. Tony, we will let you start with where the landscape stands now and what could possibly happen.
It has been a wild week. So what I thought we'd do today is we're going to talk about the Power 5 teams. Now, there is a lot of really, really, really interesting potential expansion and realignment stuff, particularly with the G5 leagues. And there are some teams like North Dakota State and South Dakota State that are looking to move up in the world. Some really, really cool stuff we can talk about. But today, I think we're going to focus on the Power 5 leagues. And one of the things that I want you guys to understand, and I have a graphic on this, we haven't pulled it up yet, but there's really a spectrum of what we talk about when we talk about realignment. So on one side is stuff that we hear from guys like Ross Dellinger and John Wilner and the Sikkim 365 guys, where we're talking about stuff that we know is going to happen. Like that is like actual factual things that are going to happen. The next realm is where we talk about like logical options and data and strategy and analysis. That's what we're going to really talk about, what may happen or what should happen. And then there's another realm where people talk about what they would like to happen. Wishful things, or like do they think would be cool, or crazy ideas or stuff like that. And like, for example, friend of the show, Golden Blue Dude, Chris, who we love, he's awesome, has like all these like wild, crazy, fun ideas, but he's not like telling you like, oh, factually, like this is going to happen. So we're going to be kind of in the middle today, talking about what we're hearing, what we see, and looking at, like, for example, some of the behavior that we're seeing from conferences and what their different priorities are as we go forward from there. So I guess we should start. And one of the things that I want to start with, which is kind of a weird place to start, but because you're going to hear these names a little bit, the AAU, which is the American Association of Universities, is really the club of like super elite research universities that everybody wants to be in. And when you are looking to put together a conference, remember the thing that you're doing is you're choosing who you want to be associated with. And that matters a lot to universities. Because remember, this is not like a AAA baseball team. These are giant multi-billion-dollar universities that also happen to have football teams. And when they make alignment decisions, they are doing so for what is in the best interest of their university. They want, for example, they want the branding of being able to be associated with other schools. So I'll give you a great example. In 2000, well, they offered in 2011, I think when they started in 2011 or 12, Colorado and Utah joined the Pac-12. Since they have done that, their annual research at both of those schools has gone up by 50%. Because Colorado is now associated with Stanford and Cal and all that instead of with Kansas State and whoever. So that is a difference. Now remember, so you hear these people like, oh, $1 million here, $1 million there. Colorado's research money is up $300 million a year since they joined the Pac-12. It's up $300 million. Utah's is up $200 million since they joined the Pac-12. And we have some numbers in this we'll look at. But for example, Utah is doing $624 million a year in research now. BYU is doing $43 million. These are not comparable universities. So one of the things that university presidents are focusing on is they are focusing on who do we want to bring into our club? And they're also focusing on who do we trust with a vote over our students? So a lot of that has to do with who's the president, who's, the history of the university and stuff like that. So the AAU, the American Association of Universities, is one of the metrics, like the highest honor you can have. And what's interesting is that there are only 3 schools left that are AAU members that play FBS football who are not yet in a Power 5 conference. And by the way, we're going to use Power 5 and A5 interchangeably. A5 means Autonomous 5. That's the real title. Power 5 is not a real word, but we use it kind of colloquially. So we'll use that. Rice, Tulane, and Buffalo. Buffalo is the flagship of the SUNY system in New York, State University of New York system. So those are 3 that, like, if you're kind of surprised, know that they are part of that group of the most prestigious universities that there are. So I thought first, let's take a look at the ACC. And let me just take down the banner just so you guys can see some of these screens here. So one of the things also that I think we should mention is the service academies, because they come up a lot when we talk about realignment. The 3 service academies have a national marketing reach. It's unparalleled. And all 3 of them are in massive media markets of New York City, DC, Baltimore, and Denver. However, the Pentagon has historically rejected conference upgrades, which is going to be becoming a bigger and bigger issue because there's actually a lot of laws and rules about military officers and ethics and like where they can get money from and like their side jobs and stuff like that. And they haven't sorted all that out, but it's going to be messy. Now, the Pentagon has rejected these schools upgrading. Air Force was originally supposed to be part of the Pac-12 when they started the Pac-12 in the 50s, and they said no. Army and Navy have flirted with and been in and out of being actually part of part of the Ivy League from like the 1800s until 1992. 1992 was the final pull apart of Army and Navy from the Ivy League. And so, the thing of it is when we talk about realignment, we're not going to talk about these 3. But for most any conference, to be honest, if I were a conference, these would be the first 3 calls I would make. But they're going to tell me no, and I would be okay with that.
If you were the Big Ten and these
maybe
3
not,
were
okay,
available,
not the Big Ten, not the Big Ten. We're talking about the other ones, I guess. If I was the ACC or I was the Pac-12 or I was the Big 12, these would be the first 3 calls I make. Well, Pac-12, maybe Air Force. Big 12, all 3 of them. ACC, all 3 of them. But again, I think that they would turn you down, but it would be the first call I would make to just make sure that they would be turning me down. Now let's talk about we're going to talk a little bit more about the ACC in terms of like them losing people. because one of the big fears is that the ACC may lose some people, but probably not until 2030 something. So we're not going to talk about them a lot because it's going to be 10 years probably before the ACC is really in danger of leaving people. Because the thing about the ACC is that they have the ironclad grant of rights in the ACC is not breakable. Again, we love our dear friend Golden Blue Dude, but like none of those teams are getting out of that. And they're probably, unless Notre Dame has a crazy moment, they're probably not adding anybody to that. So as far as the ACC goes, I think we can safely say nobody's going anywhere. The question though is for the ACC is you need to do strategic planning, and who would you backfill with? And being ready for that. And there's a lot of questions for that. So we have, right up here, there's a couple of very serious options, and it would depend on who the ACC lost. And Mark, we might want to come back to the ACC in just a little bit, because we're going to talk about like who might be poaching from them. Next is the SEC. The big thing with the SEC is we know from reporting, and guys, we're going to get through the easy ones, then get to the hard ones. We know from reporting that the SEC is very settled right now at 16, that they are not looking to expand immediately sooner. And they have been sort of very clear on their regional strategy. They're not looking at a national strategy. And I'll tell you, one of the big secrets about the SEC is the SEC cares a lot about having major important schools, and they care a lot about academics. The secret is they don't tell their fans this. It's the silliest thing you've ever heard, but I'll tell you something interesting. Since the SEC's founding in 1932, and actually since like the Big Ten was founded as well, or at least a couple years after they were founded, once the Big Ten got to 10, and then the SEC from their founding, both the SEC and the Big Ten have only added either AAU members and or state flagship campuses. Flagship campus being the major university of the state. Usually it's like, the university of whatever the state is. But there are key designations that go with being the flagship campus. And the SEC and the Big Ten only add AAU members or state flagship campuses. There's been no exceptions to that in their history when you look at what they have. So from the SEC's end, again, we look at the 6 teams the SEC has added since their founding. They're Texas, people argue whether A&M is a flagship campus. It probably might as well count as one. But South Carolina, Missouri, Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, all flagships. And half of those are AAU also. So it's just the SEC is, when we look at where the SEC is going to go, they're going to only look at, very, very major schools. And where are those? Well, they're probably in the ACC. So again, probably not for 5, 8, 10 years. The ACC is not doing anything in the short term, but over the long term, we're probably looking at the SEC having interest in Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Virginia, North Carolina, Virginia Tech. Quite honestly, I've run a lot of numbers on this, and we can look at some stuff. You can maybe argue West Virginia, probably not, based on the numbers we've seen, but that's probably it as far as like things that the SEC, the SEC fans fuss about everything, including academics. Yeah, the SEC fans like to pretend the SEC schools don't like talk about it when they talk about expansion, but it is something that matters to them greatly. So as far as like who to look at, it's not an urgent thing. So we're not looking at short-term or immediate term. We're looking at down the way. Whoever's talking about Georgia and AAU, yeah, actually Georgia probably should be in AAU, and they're actually, I think, one of the leading candidates to join. Georgia's an awesome school.
Tony,
looking here,
true?
this is, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Tony, but is
no,
it
not
true
at all.
that while we have that grant of rights expiration in 2036, that the closer we get to the grant of rights, the more possible it would be for that to be violated.
for someone to get out of it. Yeah, for someone to pay the money and get out of it. Exactly.
Maybe you're getting to this right now, but I was curious as to the schools that you just posted from the ACC, in what type of order would you rank them and why?
So I actually wouldn't yet because it's not time yet.
Yeah.
To be honest, if I was I think what I think that they're probably doing is, they have their list and they're having their communications, but if you can't get them for 5 years, then you keep your options open. Particularly because, those schools, the Big Ten and the SEC, there's a lot of overlap. There's going to be a lot of flirting, a lot of like shared dancing, who's going to be on whose dance card. You build those relationships, you set up those relationships, and you see where we are as a sport in 5 or 10 years. Because where we're going with, for example, with college football expansion, some of these teams may want to be there, some of these teams may not want to be there. We don't know exactly what the sport is going to look like. And a lot of these are very powerful and wealthy schools, and they may decide, a lot of them, they love their basketball, they love their culture, and they may decide that they want to do something or don't want to do something. We're going to look at some numbers in a little bit, and you're going to see that like sports aren't as big a deal as we think they are. For example, the entire athletic department at the University of Washington is 1.3% of its total budget. So again, it matters a lot. The president of the University of Washington, who's chairman of the PAC, who's dealing with the PAC's media rights, that's about 1/4 of Washington's athletic budget. So I bet this is the most time she has ever spent in her life dealing with 1/4 of 1.3% of her budget. But again, just sort of looking at the SEC, again, one of the deceptive things people don't realize about the SEC is there's a lot of great schools in the SEC. They do have the lowest academic ranked school in the Power Five, but one of the big things is with all the Power Five schools are great academic schools. They really are. There's no crappy school in a Power Five conference. That is super important. They are all great institutions.
And of course, just to circle back, Tony, on the point that you just made about the point that you just made about the University of Washington athletics being 1.3% of the total budget. It's obviously a very public, it's a high exposure.
It's the marketing. It's the face. It's the front porch of the university. Yep. But again, when we think about money and we think about decisions about money, like there's a lot of people, on Twitter, they're like, oh, what if we could get it to be $1 million more? $1 million more? Yeah, the school operates on like a $9 billion budget. So they'll be fine. It's just the level of investment and difference is just it's just another world and you have to think about it in terms of big dollars. Now people get really angry when I say this, but in all honesty, like if you're like Walmart corporate, think about the University of California as like Walmart corporate, like UCLA Athletics is one of your store's food courts. And that now that's an important thing, but it's not the end of the world. So this is actually just kind of a heat map. It looks at a number of different factors for the SEC. And we can dig into this more. This sort of shows where Miami would fit in with the SEC. Miami's a great school. That's why it would fit in with the Big Ten or the SEC. And Florida State and Miami actually are very similar in terms of a lot of their metrics. A lot of their market metrics, a lot of their football success metrics, their academic metrics. They're actually very similar. Miami is a small private school. Florida State, of course, is a prominent state school. But they're both very similar. You'd see in the SEC, they would be in about like the top 2/3 as far as like overall academic and athletic success. But I mean, the SEC, Florida, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, Georgia are 3 or 5 of the best academic schools in the country. Vanderbilt less successful in football, but Florida, Texas, and Georgia, and Texas A&M, I mean, those are like phenomenal universities with phenomenal athletic programs. SEC is a great conference. And I'll tell you something else. Bama. Bama's a weird one. Don't get hung up on Bama's like research dollars and stuff, because Alabama is strange in that their campus in Tuscaloosa is not where they do all their fancy research. It's not where their med school is and everything. So UAB gets all the credit for the state stuff. And UA Huntsville is where all literally the rocket science is. So if you actually combine Alabama together, they do about $1 billion a year in research. They're just like Colorado. Alabama is a much better school than they get credit for. So roll Tide. All right, so we move on to the Big Ten.
Sure.
And we're breezing through these are the easy ones. We've got a lot to chat on with the Pac-12 and the SEC. So the Big Ten is just a whole another kettle of fish for you guys. Truly, the Big Ten wants big universities, big brands, just like the SEC. The Big Ten, again, also only AAU schools and state flagship institutions, 100%. And so, I honestly think the Big Ten, like, there's going to be very quiet back of the room flirting with Texas and Texas A&M to be like, how happy are you in the SEC? You call us if you're not. They'll say no, but just like how the ACC should be on the phone with Navy and Army, the Big Ten will, I have no doubt, have backroom conversations with Texas and Texas A&M. I think they'll have a little more front room conversations with Florida and Miami. And who knows, with the SEC, they may chat with Vandy, Mizzou, Florida, just be like, hey, are you guys happy? Because again, we're not talking anything in the immediate future. We're looking at 5-10 years down the road. There may be some interesting discussions there.
Tony,
Now,
what was the story with Nebraska? Nebraska was an AAU when it joined the Big Ten, but is no longer.
Yeah, Nebraska actually got kicked out of the AAU.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And it had to do with like Nebraska. Again, Nebraska is one of those that doesn't have, kind of like Alabama, that where the med school is 100 miles away or something. It's nowhere near the school. It's like way in Omaha, and they were trying to count it, but it didn't count, so they took it away, and they weren't doing a lot of other stuff. And then they like suggested that Nebraska leave the AAU, and Nebraska was like, no, you're going to have to kick us out. And they were like, oh, we're going to. And Nebraska was like, I dare you. And they did.
Now, does the Big Ten care? Are they putting pressure on to correct that?
No. Well, remember, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 control a lot of the AAU. I don't know the backroom politics there. There had to be some backroom politics. I don't know what they were. I don't know who was mad at Nebraska. I'm told it may have been Michigan. Because like the president of Michigan, I don't know if she was at the time the president of the AAU, but like Michigan, I don't know the politics, but the Big Ten had to be okay with it for it to happen, quite honestly. Because if the Big Ten was going to put pressure for them to keep it, they may have just decided they didn't really care that much. I don't know. It's a weird, again, Nebraska is a flagship institution. It's a great school. And I don't know how back the drama goes with that relationship. I've read, and you guys don't have to tell me in the chat. I've read the articles. I think there was backroom weird politics between the presidents, and I don't know about what it was. So you'd have to ask Mary Sue Coleman. You get her on sometime.
Would love to.
Now, as for who else would the Big Ten add? We know very clearly, and this is pretty well reported, that the 16 Big Ten presidents, or 17 actually, probably count Hopkins, but the 16 full member new Big Ten presidents are not interested in further expansion at this time. They want to integrate USC and UCLA. They were in LA last week having meetings with USC and UCLA, and they are not looking for further expansion right now. So the question is, down the road, who would they be interested in? Now, Mark, we talked about this in the summer. I'm actually surprised that they didn't pilfer at least Stanford. But the rumors that we're hearing are, they're looking to expand into markets, and this is probably, I would think, the maximum list of potential Big Ten candidates that we would see. Again, we're talking 5, maybe 10 years from now. It's a really good question. Probably, the further you get down here, the less likely. So from the left to the right, more likely on the left, less likely on the right. Oregon is probably, as we'll see some stuff in some details, Oregon is not really a very Big Ten-ish school. They have a wonderful brand right now, but they don't really fit what the rest of the Big Ten is doing. Washington very much does. Stanford very much does. Cal very much does. Florida State very much does. Florida State and Miami have those markets they want. North Carolina is like the definition of a Big Ten school. Georgia Tech, the Atlanta market. Georgia Tech's a phenomenal school. It's an AAU school. Georgia Tech used to be considered better than Georgia. Virginia, world-class university, obviously. Duke, Syracuse, also former AAU. one of the questions here, I think, Mark, is, who among these teams over this 5 to 10 year period would make themselves and their brand worthy of grabbing a limited few spots? And that's something that we're going to have to see. Can Georgia Tech make themselves worth it? Can Stanford and Cal get out of this basement of morass of irrelevancy that they're in? Because we'll see in just a minute, there's like really no better schools in the world than those two.
Tony, I'm on record as saying, and again, my perspective is football and TV ratings and money and brand and all of that.
Yeah.
Which is low with the priority list compared to what you're outlining for us here. But
it's there, right? I mean, the thing is they want it all. They want you to be good at all that stuff, and they want you to be a world-class university in a giant market that everyone wants to see.
So once I was exposed to your numbers from the academic side and the endowments and all of that, with the Big Ten going to get USC and UCLA, trying to keep up with the SEC, the Florida State, Miami, I'm on record producing videos saying that would be my direction if I was the Big Ten. The recruiting, this is the only thing the Big Ten doesn't have, is they don't have enough football players in the footprint, minus Southern California. I would go to Florida State and Miami.
I agree. I actually agree with you very much. It's a new region. It gives you a pair, which has important for travel. These are great universities. The other thing about Florida State is Florida State, I mean, remember in the 1940s, I don't know, when did they get men? Was it the 1950s or was it the late 40s? It was it was the women's teachers college.
It's in that range, yes.
Yeah, it's like the late 40s. I think they added males. And so since then, I mean, and you can credit a lot of this to Bobby Bowden, the brand, and just like Penn State, you're building up the university. Florida State has been academically ascended, and they're kind of on the verge right now of AAU status, probably. Just doing phenomenal stuff, continuing to really build themselves into a juggernaut. I hear rumors that they may be designated by as a co-flagship along with the University of Florida. Who knows? But no, Florida State has just continued to build themselves up in a hockey stick way, that they're now the type of academically elite school that Miami is. Academically, they're very similar now. Again, they for those of us who are, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, we think of Florida State as like a dumb party school. It is not. Like, Florida State is a great school now. Very similar to Miami. And so from that regard, I agree with you. I think from the Big Ten standpoint, those four on the left are the four that I would get if I was the Big Ten. And then the next two, and then the next two, and just kind of keep moving over from left to right. Kansas the president can't, or the chancellor, I think he's chancellor of Kansas, was the past president of the AAU. So, Kansas is another great school. Kansas has always sort of been on their radar. The problem is, the Big Ten has 16. They're probably not going to have 32. So, might they look at 2? Might they look at 4? Might they decide we want to stay at 16? Who knows?
Hey, Tony, the one logo you don't have on the board is obviously the one that the Big Ten wants, and that's Notre Dame.
That's the one I was going to get into.
Okay, very
good.
Now,
remember, Notre Dame technically is a member of the Big Ten. They're an affiliate member in hockey. So the question is, would they go to full membership? And that is the mothership. Remember, Notre Dame, we were going to talk about Notre Dame in just a sec, but Notre Dame has a valuation carve out in the Big Ten's media deal. They are ready to add Notre Dame if the time comes.
So do you perceive the issue there between Notre Dame and the Big Ten, or Notre Dame joining any conference? I've always thought it was the best fit in the Big Ten, but again, I'm taking it more from a football historical look.
It's absolutely the best fit culturally, fit, academically.
And academically it is.
And remember, Notre Dame wanted to join the Big Ten for like 80 years. And in fact, Matt Brown, if you guys follow Matt Brown, he's one of the best follows you can have on Twitter. Brilliant guy. Wrote a book called What If? It looks at like all these great issues of college football. And one of them is, what if Michigan didn't rejoin the Big Ten when they got kicked out? I don't know if you guys know this. Michigan got kicked out of the Big Ten in I don't know, 1917 or something for cheating. And his belief was that Notre Dame would have been brought into the Big Ten, because the truth is that Fritz Chrysler hated Notre Dame. They had Michigan and Notre Dame just hated each other, and so Michigan kept Notre Dame out. And then at some point Notre Dame went from being like rejected to being proud of this independence, and now they're sort of milking it. They're financially they would be much better off in the Big Ten. Down full stop. Some charts here. It shows Sorry, I think I froze. This shows Notre Dame and Miami, shows how they would fit in the Big Ten. Notre Dame would be, Miami would be kind of right in the middle of the Big Ten. Notre Dame would be near the top, right, with USC, UCLA, and Northwestern. So Miami and Notre Dame are both very, very good fits in the Big Ten. And it's kind of a no-brainer, but like Notre Dame has to want to do it. And we'll see at some point. And this comes down to USC and UCLA, because at some point the money becomes so big that it's silly not to. Now that point is not $3 million for USC and UCLA. That point was $50 million. But what is that point for Notre Dame?
Tony, I'm going to ask you a question about these rankings that's going to be impossible for you to answer, because I think it's going to be very similar to when I present rankings, for example, except for yours are obviously based on pure metrics. And that's, when we see a school at 45 and see another school at 55, is that what you would consider a significant difference?
It varies. 45 to 55, probably not.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is you can look at different rankings. What are they measuring? I'll give you an example. San Diego State, because you have to look at it. So, for example, San Diego State, under the California Master Plan of 1960, the Cal State schools do not give PhDs. They don't do PhD research. So a lot of the academic rankings are based on your graduate school research. Well, if you don't do that, because that's not what you do, then you're not ranked very highly in that. And so, San Diego State's like ranked number 150, but at the same time, San Diego State is more elite and more competitive and harder to get into than any school in the Big 12. And would actually be if San Diego State goes in the Pac-12, they will be the third most elite selective school in the Pac-12. They'll be right behind Berkeley and ahead of Washington. So you can say, okay, so San Diego State, they're like 150th in the rankings. All right, well, guess what? They're third in the Pac-12 in selectivity, because your rankings are kind of based on something they don't do. I'm trying to think of a good football example. It would almost be like imagine remember those really good like Christian McCaffrey like Stanford teams? It'd be like if you were judging them based on attendance. Their attendance wasn't really good, but they were going to beat you.
Yeah, the military academies are never going to lead the nation in passing when they throw the ball 6 or 7 times a game. They could be really good at that, but they just don't do it.
Exactly. And so that's the thing about a lot of these rankings is you look at it and you say, okay, does this really matter? Does this school have like kind of an asterisk on it? And if it does, then okay, we think about that. I'll give you a great example. West Virginia. West Virginia is an awesome school. West Virginia is a phenomenal school, but West Virginia is a school that has made it its mission to educate the people of Appalachia. Like in West Virginia, the bottom end of West Virginia, like you can get in there, even if not very strong students can get in there. But the top end of West Virginia, I think West Virginia has more Rhodes Scholars than USC and Berkeley. Like West Virginia is a great school. So like you look at the rankings and you say, okay, well, West Virginia, what are they ranked like 250th? Okay, well, you know what? West Virginia is actually doing better than a lot of schools that are top 100 in certain things. So you gotta look at that and say like, okay, is this ranking reality or not? And also trajectory. Houston is on a massive upward trajectory. UCF, massive upward trajectory. And so you always have to count that, and that's part of why the Big 12 loved them. Part of why the Pac-12 almost took Houston last year. If you take here, this looks at where the Pac-5, the five founders of the Pac-12, where they would fit in the Big Ten. And we looked at this before, Mark. You kind of see Oregon is not very Big Ten-y. I mean, we love the swoosh and all the, isn't it cool that they have 735 jerseys that will all cause cirrhosis of the eye if you look too closely at them. But Oregon doesn't really fit as well here into the Big Ten. As look at their Washington, Cal, Notre Dame, Stanford, they're a little more Big Ten-y. But who knows? And we're going to talk a little bit about, I'll tell you, for example, something nobody talks about. The two schools from the Pac-12 that really do fit well in the Big 12 are Oregon State and Washington State. And nobody talks about that. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But now should we talk about the fun one?
Oh, here we go.
All right. So the Pac-12 is finalizing their media rights. We're going to talk about whether or not the Pac-12 is really vulnerable to losing teams to the Big 12. So there is an anonymous Twitter account that tends to tell things that are not true. They have been since September, I believe, predicting that immediately that Oregon and Washington were going to join the Big Ten. You guys have seen they're not. We know for a fact they're not. We've known they're not. This account continues to lie to people about that. This account has repeatedly lied to people about Arizona and Arizona State, like whether they were like, oh, they're all about to join the Big 12. They're about to join it. It's not happening. And it hasn't been happening. So this account has literally been lying. I mean, it's just, if it's not true, then I love it. Uncle Rico, I thought everything was true on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, the thing is like, if you just scroll through this account and they're just like saying things that are not true. I don't know what they base it on, and it doesn't really matter because it's not true. It's like hopeful nonsense. But I thought we would look at just some data and you guys can decide for yourself. So in key metrics that matter, the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are very, very different. You see the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and the Big 10 are very similar. The Big 12 is not. So this just sort of looks, here's your academic ranking. Big 10's 53, Pac-12 is 95, Big 12 is 147, AAC is 168. It's just, AAU members, AAU is very, very important. Pac-12 is 70%. Big 12 has 1. The Big West has 5 times as many AAU members as the Big 12. The AAC has twice as many. The Mountain West has twice as many flagship campuses as the Big 12 does. So it's just they're not what the Pac-12 institutions have prioritized on. Let's look at sports. Big 12 does not have a lot of the sports offerings that the Pac-12 schools seek. They don't offer the sports. A lot of the school, sometimes the conference offers them, the school doesn't, or they'll just have like one tournament at the end of the year. They won't actually play each other at anything because not enough of the schools do it. You look at the Big 12, they don't really do the whole Olympic sports things very much. Average Big 12 school has 17 Olympic medals. Average Pac-12, 83. Average national championships, Pac-12's at 30. Big 12's at 11. Again, they're not running the same types of programs. So, it's fine. And the thing is again, Big 12 is awesome. I am totally on the Big 12 train, but it's just different. And that's okay. You look at resources and scale, and this is where it starts to get interesting. This is where we're talking about money. They're not the same. Take a look. We're going to look at research in just a sec. The Pac-12 schools tend to be twice as big. The budgets are twice the size of the Big 12 schools. Their donations are, 3 and 4 times dollars coming in. It's part of why they're not the Big 12 schools. We'll talk more about $2 million here. The Pac-12 schools, again, the average Pac-12 school is raking in $345 million a year in donations. The average Big 12 school is 92. So it's just kind of different. They lack serious research institutions. So this looks at research. But let me show you something wacky, because two of the Pac-12 schools, Colorado and Cal, actually kind of do their research a little screwy how they account for it. And if you correct for that to standardize with everybody else, standardize the rest of the Pac-12, standardize with the Big 10, the Big 12, everybody else, all of a sudden you see the Pac-12 is actually number 2 in research. Cal's actually number 1. They beat Hopkins by $1 billion. if you measure them like everybody else measures each other. Washington's at $1.5 billion. Stanford's at $1 billion. Colorado's at $1 billion. The biggest Big 12 schools, Cincinnati, they're at $500 million. Any of the Four Corners schools do more research than the Big 12. The Four Corners schools together do more research than all of the Big 12. And again, since joining the Pac-12, Colorado is doing $300 million a year more. Their increase is $300 million a year more in research than they were doing before. They very much value being a part of this conference. Now let's look at the media dollars. This is really interesting. So again, just remembering that for the Pac-12, average core academic budget is $2 billion. 4% of that is athletics. Big 12 average size is $900 million, much smaller, less than half. 11% is athletics. Washington, again, the total budget in Washington, the number is 1.3%. So, let's look at the Big 12 deal here. So let's just get into this. The Big 12, you guys know this. They recently signed an extension with ESPN and Fox, $31 million a year in media rights. Now, that comes with a pro rata clause that says if they add any power conference schools, they get an extra $20 million a year. That's it. They actually only get it from ESPN. They don't get it from Fox. Now, there's a lot of nitwits that are like, oh, I bet they just give us more. No, guys, that's not how TV contracts work. Mark, does ESPN just be like, you know what we should do? Oh my God, we should give them more money. Do they do that?
No, that's not the way they operate.
No, that's not the way they operate. So yeah, the money that has been allocated in the Big 12's deal is $20 million. Now, if you're a G5 school, the money that's been allocated is $0. So if the Big 12 adds G5 schools, and we'll talk a little bit, I think there's actually some smart things they should do and kind of eat the money on. Because I'm a fan of Big 12 expansion, but the adding amount is $0. Oh my God, are people really worrying about 31.67 because it shortened it, took off the zeros?
Yes.
Oh my God, guys.
See,
this is the type of rounding error that is why these Twitter people are full of nonsense. So now let's talk about the exit fees. So the Big 12 has an exit fee that is twice you have to join for it's like a 99-year agreement, and the fee is about twice your payout. So the payouts are going to go up. They're going to have college football playoff money in them. So if any of these schools were to join, they'd be looking at about $100 million exit fee. So again, remembering that we're looking at $20 million as the amount that a Power 5 conference team could get. But remember, with a Pac-12 team, you're probably looking at about $5 million a year in extra travel per the calculations we've seen. Based on West Virginia, based on UCLA, it's 3 to 6, depending on what you want to calculate it as. Probably, but you're looking at about $5 million in travel. That means that the maximum media rights portion here that the Big 12 could really offer somebody is $15 million. That's it. Because you're looking at 20 minus 5 extra spending in travel. So now let's look at the Pac-12. We've heard media rights valuations estimates at 30 to 35. We know that they had early lowball offer from ESPN. We've heard that valued between 25 and 30. We also know that based on current financials, because we're going forward here, the Pac-12 content standalone, if they were to just keep running the network, which they don't want to do, but if they did want to do that, it'd probably be about $3 to $6 million a year. And they have a $0 exit fee. So, and again, like we said, extra cost of about $5 million. Now, remember that there's a little more money that the conferences get, which is the college football playoff money, the bowl money, the NCAA share, the NCAA academic share, the NCAA March Madness share, all that stuff together. It's about $10 million now. It's going to be about $20 million probably when they expand the CFP. We'll see, but it's really going to be about the same between the conferences. So we're just looking at the media portion, but know that there's another, 10 to 20 that each conference adds on. So, just looking at the media rights offering, I don't see how the math would work that it would make sense for any of these teams to leave. Just the money's not there. And if you did something where you're like, oh, well, guess what? I think we could get Fox to chip in another $5 million because we're so cool and we barbecue really well at Iowa State. Okay, you're still not there. You're still not close. It just doesn't make sense.
It's just a lot of money for any individual media platform to have to kick in extra for every additional school. It's just substantial to keep the per average where it was prior to that.
And as Gumby points out, it's true. The Chinese spy balloon was just trying to get the Pac-12 network. So guys, these are the actual numbers. This is why, again, I don't know why these people are telling you stuff that's not true. But these are the numbers. So, if the Pac-12, if they got 25, I mean, even if they got 20, it's still more than they would be able to get from the Big 12 net into the budget. And as you saw, we looked at the institutional numbers. The association is not what they want to do. And there's a really hard part about, the Pac-12 schools turn these folks down. So let's look at something that's actually this. And I'm not bagging on the Big 12 guys. I love the Big 12, but I'm trying to help you guys understand where are they counting to 6. So again, this fake rumor said that 6 of the Pac-12 teams were going to go. Is it possible? I guess. Is it likely? I don't think so. Let's look. So first of all, there were 4 schools they said there's no rumors of interest: Stanford, Cal, Wazoo, Oregon State. Stanford and Cal occupy the most valuable media market. Stanford's on the executive board. They set the priorities for the conference. Cal's on the AAU board. These folks, they matter. Their opinions are heard. Their opinions are not being heard. Also, there's a lot of issues with BYU because of academic freedom, because of discrimination. Some of the Pac schools have a very serious problem. They are not interested in being in a conference with BYU. Wazoo and Oregon State, the Big 12 has claimed not to be interested in them, despite the fact their metrics, they fit really well. Remember that Wazoo is on the conference executive committee. They occupy the second most valuable media market. And in both states, political leaders are very clear that they do not intend to let Washington or Oregon leave Wazoo and Oregon State. So there's 4 not available. So I guess it would have to be the bottom 6. Well, let's look at the bottom 6. You hear this stuff about, Washington's not happy. Washington is chair of the Pac board. Dr. Cauchi gets what she wants. She's literally the chairperson. She decides what she wants. Oregon does not have a CEO right now. The president of Oregon is gone. They have an interim president. He was the provost. He's, I think, a famous biologist. He's an awesome guy. But he doesn't have the power in that state right now to screw over Oregon State. He just doesn't. I'm sorry. People, Oregon has, people. I got some guy yelled at me on Twitter. Don't worry, Oregon has leadership. Okay, well, guess what? Oregon's not going to screw over Oregon State as an interim president, or he's going to find his box on the curb faster than you can shake a stick. Also, they're kind of both very interested in the Big Ten. Not a secret. They're not going to agree to a 99-year agreement with $100 million buyout. They're just not going to. And also, by the way, they both have huge issues with BYU's inclusion. So there's 2 more. Arizona and Arizona State. Remember, they share the same board of regents, who've been clear that they intend to keep them together, just as they dragged them together into the Pac-8 in 1976. So those 2 are going to stay together. Both of those institutions enormously depend on California markets for student body recruitment, alumni engaging in donor fundraising, and fans. Both of them heavily rely on the Pac-12 for prestige. The Arizona AD himself gave about an hour-long podcast last week where he talked about their commitment to the Pac-12 and talked about how they were all together. So was the Arizona athletic director literally just lying to the media for 45 minutes? I don't think so. And then the Arizona State president, God love him, he's awesome, super academic snob in a good way, has no interest in the Big 12. There's 2 more. We've talked about Colorado and Utah, how heavily they rely on the Pac for academic prestige. They rely on California for students. Colorado already quit the Big 12 once under this chancellor. He literally quit the Big 12 already once. Think he's going to go back? I don't think so. Utah also very all in on Pac culturally, they're super proud of the Rose Bowl, everything like that. And quite honestly, the Utah people, when I've talked to people who work there, people who are part of the university, I mean, we're not talking like Twitter fans, like people who are part of the university, they believe that joining the Pac-12 is a key piece of their ascendancy, and not only over BYU, but just in the country in general. I mean, it got them in AAU, got them everything. And so they don't really have a plan to leave. So these are the 10 members. I can't count to 2, let alone 6. And I leave it to you guys. You guys in the chat, do you see 6 people that would leave on this list?
And for each one of these 6 at the bottom, Tony, how important would it be for each one to have a partner go with them?
So that again is up to the regions. So for example, Washington and Oregon, I mean, their states have been very clear that they expect them to go together. Now Washington pulled some shenanigans in 1958 when they snuck out of the Pacific Coast Conference to join the Pac-12. They left Wazoo behind. Wazoo joined up 5 years later. Because a lot of the history of the Pac-12 is awesome. It is like more wild than the Real Housewives. We should call the history of the Pac-12 Real Housewives of the West Coast. But I think in this political climate, there is just not an ability to get one of those without the other. And because again, remember too, at the end of the day, what if the difference was $2 million? Remember, we're talking about 1.3% for the entire department. And would the state of Washington find $1.2 million? Probably. So it just, again, the math doesn't work on this making sense for people. To preserve the prorate, I mean, this, I don't know who this is. Like, you guys don't know the math. Because remember, Fox, for example, Fox only wants to televise a certain number of games because that's what they're scheduling. So that's why they're set at that number. They don't want more. So it's just, it's an interesting thing. Again, Big 12 is awesome. I am so on board with the Big 12, but we're just trying to help these people understand you're being lied to. It's really kind of scary. A lot of these groups, these people, it's literally just like QAnon, where they make shit up and people listen to it, and then they think it's going to happen. And again, this is the list. So if somebody can count to 6, and somebody can help us figure out, where are you getting? So again, 15. Okay, you're gonna say, we're gonna find 5 more. Okay, so you find 5 more. You're still way short. It's just not happening. So let's talk about what the Pac-12 will do. Well, looking at this list, the belief sort of within a lot of the conference experts, the people, you look at the math, and we're going to look at some numbers here. The common belief is the Pac-12 will either, they're going to do one of 3 things. They're going to stay at 10, and I don't know if they've changed the name back to Pac-10 or not. They've always changed the name before. But they may stay at 10 if the math works, but I don't think so. The next option really is that they would go to 12. And the consensus around those 12 is that they would replace UCLA and USC with San Diego State and SMU. Now, there's a couple things that are really interesting here. First one is it's really fitting. So SMU and USC were both Methodist schools. They both are very early. They're private schools, kind of snotty in a good way. Both have rich football history, death penalty, and all that since then. Awesome alumni bases, beautiful campuses, prime recruiting areas. There's a lot of similarities between SMU that I think are very plug and play to replace USC. San Diego State has a very, very important thing in that they are the only non-Big Ten football team south of Fresno. So if you want to be in Southern California, the only FBS football team is San Diego State. And the Pac-12 depends on Southern California for students at Stanford and Cal and Washington and Oregon and Arizona and Arizona State and Colorado. Like, they depend on Southern California for students. It's where their alumni are. It's where their donors are. So just San Diego State seems to be an easy ad. The other thing is that people are going on record at San Diego State talking about wanting to join the pack. And I don't think they do that if they don't already know they have a handshake deal. The consultants from here on that San Diego State is working with have gone on record talking with John Canzano. They don't do that if San Diego State's not okay with it and if the pack's not okay with it. So, I actually, again, this is not, I'm not telling you the inside secrets. I'm giving you my personal opinion is that I don't think that those people act like they are acting if they do not know for sure that they are going to very, very, very soon join the Pac-12. So go Aztecs. Now there's another question, which is, should the Pac-12 go bigger? Should they add more than just the two? And you start to hear things where you hear Fresno, you hear Rice, you hear Tulane, you hear UNLV, you hear Boise, you hear South Florida, you hear Memphis, you hear all kinds of things about, what should the Pac-12 do? Really good questions. I don't think that they're going to. Now, Mark and I have talked about this, and again, my personal recommendation, if I was advising the Pac-12, I would say add Fresno, because I would be very afraid that the Big Ten is at some point going to take Cal or Stanford, and you want to maintain that California footprint. Fresno does not make sense academically. It does not make sense financially. It seems excessive. It seems like extra and you don't need it, but I would do it because I think it provides you a strategic buffer for if you were to lose somebody else. I also think the Big 12 should think about taking Fresno, if that possibility is there. But as far as sort of what we think is going to happen, we think it's going to be very simple, and they're going to switch out 2 with 2, probably add 2 big TV markets in Southern California and in Dallas. But we don't know. So again, I'm not telling you like for sure this is happening. I'm not reporting insider information. I'm not making up stuff like the Twitter people. I'm just telling you that when we look at the numbers, and we're going to look at the numbers here in just a sec, those are the 2 that I think make the most sense. Again, because San Diego State is strategically in Southern California like that. Let's look at this is the Pac-12 and the Big 12 combined. You see they're very different conferences. The institutions are very different, and that's okay because they're all great institutions. They're all great institutions. They're just different, and I don't think that they will mingle as well as the Twitterverse seems to think. All the people that are super worried about like how many people are at a game at Stanford and like how great the barbecue is at Iowa State, like they don't get it, and that's okay. They don't have to. I'm seeing some of the stuff in the chat. So let's look at Pac-12 expansion options. Again, these are, I think, the best expansion options here. Rice is phenomenal because Rice is a massive market. Rice is a phenomenal school. I mean, it's better than some of the Ivy League schools. Awesome place. But the problem with Rice is their football team is atrocious. I mean, John F. Kennedy had a joke in his Moon speech about Rice being bad, and why does Rice play Texas is one of the questions. And he says, we choose to go to the moon and do this and that and the hard things. Literally a joke about Rice playing Texas in that speech. Go look it up if you haven't heard it. So, again, would Rice be a candidate if they were going to go bigger than 12? I think so. But we'd see their football team is pretty bad. SDSU, again, their metrics, remember, put a big asterisk on that because SDSU is one of the most elite schools in the country. More elite academics as far as admissions and stuff than anybody in the Big 12. But remember, they don't have PhD programs, so they don't get ranked well for that. SMU, great. We talked about Air Force just being awesome. When you make Air Force tell you no. Houston, great fit for the Pac-12. We believe they have signed that 99-year deal with the Big 12, which makes them not really applicable anymore. But we left it on the chart here. You see Fresno, the Colorado State's a great one. Guys, I love Boise, but it doesn't give you the market and it doesn't give you the academics. And even though they're doing awesome stuff, I don't see them for the Pac-12. San Jose State was actually originally, when Stanford was having a pout fest in the 50s, San Jose State was almost a founding member of the Pac-12. San Jose State, but San Jose State's just not there football wise, I don't think, or there institutionally. By the way, San Diego State and San Jose State are the flagship schools of the Cal State system. So they're both actually pretty good schools, but San Diego State is like sort of legions above it. But they, again, I just think that you're probably looking at SDSU and SMU like everybody says. And if you're going to go bigger, you probably have Rice. We should have Tulane on this chart. I didn't realize they're not on here because we'd use this chart for something else. But you should probably have Tulane on there as well. But one of the things that the Pac-12 has talked about is the importance of proximity. Like they are scoffing at USC and UCLA and saying we should not go national. So I don't see that. Even if you do the strategic math and you say, okay, this makes sense, I don't see them doing that. So I think that that's what they fill it with. So sorry to blab on for a while with that.
Going to Texas is going national. They see that as staying within their region.
I think that's as far as they can go. Because remember, in 2021, when all the members of the Big 12 applied to the Pac-12, all of them, maybe not West Virginia because they're really far, but all the others did. They did all the analysis, they did all the math, and they came back with a recommendation. Just like I told you, they looked today. They said, okay, they're going to say, should we take 10? Should we take 12? Or should we go bigger? They might also take 11. There might be a middle ground. They might take San Diego State and nobody else. But they said, should we expand or should we not? They ran all the numbers. They did all the math. And they came back and said we should take 2, one in Houston and one in Dallas. Because remember also, the Pac-12 is really big on travel. They want travel to be convenient and easy because they want kids to not miss school. It's really big that the Pac-12 does that. It's super important to them. Not as important as some other schools. I mean, if you're in Lubbock, like travel's a nightmare no matter what you do. I love Texas Tech and their market. They have a great market because they have the whole market. The state is the whole market. We'll talk about that later. But travel is very important to the Pac-12, and so like making sure you're near a decent airport, if they can fix that, is fairly important to them. San Diego is a big airport. Dallas, of course, massive global hub. Houston, global hub. So in 2021, they recommended Houston and TCU. Now they brought it to the Pac-12, and under that, the TV deal at that time, adding them would actually be dilutive, and they would have lost money. And so USC and UCLA said, no, we do not want to lose any more money. Because the Pac-12 guys used to not share revenue equally. Pac-12 used to have an eat what you kill, that depending on how many times you were on TV and how like prestigious your TV games were, was how much money you got. So in 2010, USC was getting more money than Alabama from the conference because they had unequal revenue sharing. Bill Moose from Wazoo, may he, burn in hell for wrecking the conference, and Larry Scott came in. The two of them had this terrible idea of going to equal revenue sharing, and they botched the conference and drove it to hell in a handbasket. They're building out of that since then. But they now have equal revenue sharing. And so USC and UCLA, who've been suffering under this because they never had equal revenue sharing while the conference was successful. Now they had equal revenue sharing, and they said, okay, we're not going to lose further money just to add these schools. In retrospect, you look at how things played out, the move to the Big Ten, what the Big 12 did. What should they have maybe taken TCU and Houston? Probably. Quite honestly, I think SMU is a better fit for them than TCU, just culturally and institutionally. So it's, the football gods work in mysterious ways, and maybe they're going to take care of the Pac-12 better that way.
Tony, we also hear theories out there that with the ACC being somewhat vulnerable, although you've put that to rest in the interim, they certainly
for the short and medium term.
Yeah, they have their concerns 5+ years down the road that they would actually extend across the country to the Pac-12 and try to form some kind of deal, whether that's a complete joining of two conferences or just some kind of an agreement to strengthen their position.
An alliance per se?
Yeah, an alliance.
Scheduling. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, that's a poisonous word right now. No, so you look at something like that, and that's where you say to the TV people, like, okay, is that something that would work from the TV deal standpoint? When we look at, and when we go way back up to those numbers, you look at like the reason that they created that alliance was about voting, and there's a lot of like people don't understand this, but it was about voting in the college football playoff stuff and alignment of your institutional values And the ACC and the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have very, very, very similar institutional values. And if you're about to make like a ferocious, like angry type about that, then you don't share those institutional values. If you're one of those people who's been like angry typing about like research doesn't matter because we have better barbecue, then you do not share those institutional values. And that's why you were not in that alliance. And so when you look at would the ACC and the Pac-12 have like, I mean, yeah, Washington and North Carolina and Virginia and Stanford and Wake Forest and SMU, like, I mean, talk about twin schools. They really would be pretty good together. And if they could come up with something like that, I mean, I think it would be a great idea because they have a lot of similarities, especially in their priorities and their focus and all being like super, super world-class schools. ACC is the number 2 academic conference behind the Big Ten in the Power 5. So the Pac-12 is a lot of the very top, but they also have the ag schools. And the ACC doesn't have those ag schools, so it doesn't drag the averages down.
So we've reviewed what each conference, in your opinion, should do, especially the Pac-12 in particular.
Well, and by the way, the Big 12.
Yeah.
Just hit on the Big 12 really quick. There's a couple of debates on the Big 12. So first is the question of, I believe strategically that the Big 12 should consider adding some of the G5 schools, if not now, because again, there's $0 to do this under their current contract. But I think that they could build those relationships and maintain those relationships, whether it's Memphis, Boise. I think having USF is essential for the Big 12. Central Florida is on an island by itself. And I think adding South Florida to Central Florida is a really, really important thing because I think that if the ACC needs a backfill, South Florida is a great school. It's a great school. And in the ACC, if the ACC is worried about Miami and Florida State, and they want to maintain a presence in Florida. And again, we're talking about moving chess pieces 10 years from now. But if you want to look 10 years from now, which is the smart thing to always do, if I were the Big 12, I would make sure that I had South Florida to go with Central Florida. If I were the Big 12, I would try to get Fresno.
Tony, the train has left the station, a year or so ago, but I was suggesting 5 and 6 years ago that the ACC should go after UCF.
Yeah. UCF is a great school. And again, UCF is one of those schools like Houston and like Florida State, they're on a hockey stick upwards of what they used to be, Florida Tech. They have, I think, the number 5 hospitality school in the world or something, behind like Cornell and Michigan State and UNLV in the place in Switzerland. Central Florida is a great school, and so is South Florida. So these are places that if you were going to get now again, the problem with the Big 12. They are more budget constrained just because they tend to have smaller overall budgets. And so, if you're going to add these G5 schools, you have to eat the cost of that. Now, one of the things, by the way, I think is very affordable is there's a lot of talk on Gonzaga and also some talk about the Big East schools. Now, basketball is great. If these basketball only schools, they're cheap. Because you only have to pay them like, I don't know, $5 million a year or something versus 30, or a reduced share of 20 or 25. So it's very affordable. Like if the Big 12 wanted to add Gonzaga, I think it's a really smart ad for them because Gonzaga is a great school. It's a Catholic school. It's a Jesuit school. I think Jesuit, I'm going to reveal myself here, but I think the Jesuits in the room make any decision-making process better. The Jesuit priests are awesome. So I think Gonzaga would be a great ad. The other thing is that BYU is an island by itself and needs a travel partner. And the way a travel partner works has nothing to do with football, guys. But like, for example, if you're going to play soccer and you're going to send your soccer team to Provo, you're going to get your soccer team from, Lubbock to Provo or Morgantown to Provo. And then they just have to fly back. I mean, the nearest school to BYU is Iowa State. So I think having a travel partner, having somewhere else to go while you're out at BYU makes a lot of sense. And the thing is if you add Fresno, you got to pay. It's expensive. You got to pay a lot. you add Utah State or somebody, you got to pay a lot. Boise, you got to pay a lot. But you could add Gonzaga on the cheap, and you could get the benefit of that. So, I think it's a great idea. I mean, the other thing, and we could talk, and this is something more for Gold and Blue, dude. But, I've talked to some Big 12 people about this. If they could get like Navy football and Gonzaga for everything else, like that would be amazing. There's a lot of really, really, really cool stuff that the Big 12 could do. Boise State is fantastic. But you're talking about adding football. And if you're adding football gets expensive. So, the Big 12, I know that Brett Yormark has a plan. Brett Yormark is awesome. I know that he has a plan and he's working on that plan. I'm sure. And he knows that plan is probably a 5-year plan, but probably that also involves some of these other schools getting ready. Jeremiah Dickey is an amazing athletic director at Boise State, just phenomenal. And he was the deputy under Mac Rhodes at Baylor. He's like, Max, and also Ren Baker is another one of those from the Mac Rhodes tree of like great athletic directors. And Jeremiah Dickey is sort of the next one. He's building Boise into a Power 5 school. And so, again, I think you keep that relationship and you add them while you can. And part of that for Big 12 fans is that like, okay, let's, knock off this Arizona nonsense because it's probably not happening. Again, I could be wrong. I'm not reporting inside information. The people that I've talked to at Arizona tell me that they're absolutely going nowhere, but, it could be wrong. I don't think it's wrong, but the sooner you get on the train with like Boise and Gonzaga, I think, the better for the conference.
Tony, clarify something for us in regards to the budgeting of money, because if I've seen this comment 1,000 times, based on what you do, you've probably seen it 10,000 times, and we see more of it in the live chat right now. People will say, for example, if Stanford's got so much money, why do they suck in football? Okay, well, we're talking about...
That's a really good question. And that's a question that a lot of rich people in Palo Alto would like the answer to. So there's a lot of very, very wealthy tech people in San Francisco that would like the answer to that question.
Well, when we see these enormous endowments at places like Stanford and Cal and elsewhere, but most notably Stanford, how much does that, I can see where for the realm of this conversation, that impacts decisions to join and align with other schools. But in regards to it impacting the football program,
so this is about your school's commitment. Like, what do you want to spend? And again, and this is where leaders make decisions. So, I mean, I'll give you an example, and let's talk about Cal, because Cal is a crazy institution. Like, Cal is probably, I hate Cal. When I went to apply to business school, by the way, I sat there in front of that empty screen and I couldn't write my essays to the Haas school. And I couldn't write my essays. And then I was like, why can't? And then I realized I was like, oh, it's because I hate Cal and I don't want to go there. And then I just closed that window and my life was happy and I went to Penn instead. But so I am a Cal hater, but I will tell you that the University of California is probably the most important institution of higher education, public institution of higher education in the history of man. So there's that. When you look at the periodic table, you look at elements of berkelium and californium, that's what they stand for. Yes, in fact. They invented and they still run American nuclear weapons. Marv Levy got to be the president of Cal because the nuclear weapons guys found him in New Mexico while they were blowing stuff up at Los Alamos. So, like, this is an institution that has resources and everything else. Dr. Christ, who's their president or their chancellor, has recently committed school money to sort of like solve some of the problems of their athletic department's finances. And the question is, like, as an institution, are you willing to commit? Are you willing to build facilities? Are you willing to spend? For I do is a. So why do they sign Regent Gumby? I think he's in our chat. Yeah, like, Cal should be awesome, and why are they not? Now you look at a school like Rice. In the past, Rice has not committed the resources that they need to be successful. So this is where you say, like, again, when we look to add a school, is this a school that we trust will that will make the investment and make that commitment and not be a moocher. I mean, I'll give you an example. Because you guys who watch our Pac-12 show, we ripped on Colorado for a lot. We put Rick George in a dumpster fire, literally burning alive in a dumpster fire in graphics, because we thought Colorado wasn't committed. And then Colorado went out and was like, okay, well, let's double down on this and fix this problem. And Colorado, turned that in a corner. Funny, because it's the same people. They didn't do what USC did, which is like, let's bring in new people. They actually had their success with the same people. And so, your question there is why are they not successful? And to people who are like, oh, they care about more than academics and football. Remember, elite academic schools want to be good at everything they do. Sucking at anything bothers them greatly.
Especially when it's on a national stage.
They do not want to see that and you guys may counter me with this a little bit with Vandy, but they don't want to suck at anything. Now, people are like, what about endowments, blah, blah. The thing about endowments allow you to fund what you want. They mean that you're funding your money, you're funding your resources, like you can control what you want to do. The reason the University of Chicago was always so successful, in the early 1900s is because Rockefeller had endowed them with enough money that they didn't care. The reason Chicago was able to just stop playing football and really you want to talk about pissing off your alumni when you just like stop playing football, was because they had their massive endowment. They could do that. Again, the endowments give you financial freedom to do what you want to do, to spend the money you want to spend and know that your school is going to be okay. You're not worried about like state cycles and budget cuts and all that. You can spend the money. Stanford can spend whatever they want. So why do they stink? And part of this also, a lot of times, a lot of these schools have to come with a reckoning. I mean, this is sort of what happened to a lot of the Pac-12 schools is they were sort of complacent for a while and then they got bad. And 2019 was the worst time in the Pac-12 since before its founding. 2021, I'm sorry, was the worst season in the Pac-12 going back to like 1946, I think. So before the actual Pac-12 was founded in 1949, it's the Pacific Coast Conference with Montana and Idaho. And they had to have a little like come to Jesus moments, and they did. And you saw USC and UCLA, they started making commitments. They started writing checks. They started laying down money. You saw it at Washington. I mean, Utah has been kind of on board for a while, and you just finally saw Stanford like start to make some changes. Now, Cal's renovated their stadium. Cal's built great facilities. They believed in their coach. So why are they so bad is a really good question. But look at SMU. Look at the commitment SMU's made. SMU is a G5 school. They have one of the top NIL programs in the country. They have spectacular facilities, and they're building them to be even better. Again, it's a question. It's all about like commitment. Like, is this somebody who's committed to do what they need to do?
Tony Altimore is here to answer your questions and break it down. And we wanted to have Tony, with all the rumors and all the conversations swirling on social media and otherwise, to clear up some things for us in regards to what the truth is. And again, Tony's very upfront about saying, hey, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can present the numbers, I can present the metrics, I can enlighten everyone on strategies and what's being talked about and what the conversations are, certainly.
And guys, remember too, like wild things can happen. So, when you look at it, like sometimes people do things that don't make sense. But that's up to you guys.
Are you ready to take some questions, Tony?
Let's do it.
All right. So we have left the show link in the chat, so you can call the show if you'd like. Otherwise, we will screen the live chat for questions right now. But again, we have left the link in the chat so you can join the show.
Yeah, and also, by the way, we were laughing about Cal. Yeah, I mean, Cal had this really crappy coach who could never. I mean, he was never going to win anything. What was his name? Oh, Sonny Dykes. Oops.
I know. No proven track record in the Power Five, and then he shows up at TCU and orchestrates one of the greatest turnarounds in college football history.
Kevin's asking, can ND be forced to join a conference? So Notre Dame Notre Dame's position on the college football playoff committees, like their leadership committees and stuff, they're like their own conference. It's like the shadiest thing ever. Their president sits next to the other commissioners. Their president sits next to the head of the presidents of the thing, and their AD sits with the commissioners. So it's super dodgy. If I was Notre Dame, you enjoy this power, but at the same time, the money from the Big Ten that Notre Dame could get, it's just there's going to come a point where Notre Dame is going to be like, you know what, $50 million a year just to have would be really nice, and that's the point at which I think they join the Big Ten.
And I don't know if it's much of a deterrent, but certainly this new college football playoff format that's starting in 2 seasons is one step in that direction, stating that you have to win a conference to receive a bye. I don't think that's a deterrent to cause Notre Dame to join a conference in and of itself. But again, it is.
Devil Frog, friend of the show. We love Devil Frog, by the way, is totally awesome. Like one of my favorite people on the internet. It's true. He did leave Cal in better shape than he found it. But still, like I just laugh because like he just should absolutely just dunk like on Cal somehow every possible opportunity because they ran him out on a rail and he's an awesome coach. So go really Sonny Dykes, go Frog. Wait, am I doing the frogs right? Devil Frog, is this right?
I think you got it there.
I got it down.
I have never done that myself.
I was so cheering for you guys in the playoffs.
And I will say that we're a big fan of Sonny Dykes first and foremost because he has appeared here on the show about 4 or 5 times.
That's awesome. Go Sonny.
Absolutely. Great guy. We've got Larry Pilgrim on the line. It's always great to hear from Larry as well. What's going on, Larry?
Not much. I just I got a couple questions for Tony. So obviously awesome. You guys know I'm a U. So Tony, I know a couple guys at the university, and from my understanding, what they're telling me is the University of Utah's biggest goal, number one, over sports athletics, and it's academic, but it is the medical side of the academia that is the University of Utah's number one priority for the university, research, just everything. And so I don't know much about the Big 12 and their medical, if they even have anybody that aligns with Utah on progression.
Kansas.
Because that's their ideal situation, is they want to keep progressing in the medical industry, not the football industry.
Texas Tech has a really good, and actually it's spread out around the state. They have a really good medical system. Kansas is a great school. Kansas is a world-class school. Their football team has just been atrocious. Right. In all honesty, if Kansas did not have the worst football team in like the history of football, Kansas would be in the Big 10 or the Pac-12 today. Kansas, for example, was on the Pac-12's like preferred lists going back into like the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. So Kansas world-class school. Kansas Chancellor, again, he's the past chair of the AAU. He's still on their board. Kansas is a great school. Again, all the Big 12 schools are great schools, but the flagship schools are typically the ones with the med schools. And
right.
So
that's my question.
And that's those are in the Pac-12, the Big 10, SEC, and the ACC.
Okay, so in other
even
words,
like the Mountain West, because again, the Mountain West has 4 state flagship schools.
Right. Okay. So that was my question, was that they would go backwards if they went to the Big
Larry,
12.
I froze or you froze, one of the two.
You froze. So Utah would actually go backwards if they went.
But here's the other thing. They'd be going, it'd be like, again, there's more medical schools, I think, in the Mountain West than the Big 12. But now again, you have other things, like for example, Baylor's medical school has nothing to do with Baylor. So Baylor, they're a school, but it's not really tied to the university. But again, the big thing is, one of the big things though, is there's 2 sort of questions here for the Pac-12 schools going to the Big 12, which is, are you going because you want to, or are you going because you have to? I mean, there could be a situation, and this was the situation, the question in July, and it was a fair question, was, will the Big 10 pillage the Pac-12? will the Big Ten walk away with Stanford and Cal and Washington? And if they do, and the whole thing falls apart, then yes, the Big 12 is awesome. And you might, and those schools, if they needed a home, might want to join, or they might want to stay together and put together a new version of the Pac-12. Those are big picture questions that might change. But under the current situation, I just don't see a world where it makes sense for them.
Right, and that's what. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Cal, Washington, even Stanford,
the Big 12
right,
has
have
awesome
huge
schools.
Right.
They have awesome schools. They're not trying. Like, for example, I mean, let's look at Utah and BYU. So BYU is ranked what, number 80, 79, something like that in the country.
BYU is an accounting school.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's a very good accounting school. I went to grad school with a lot of devout Cougar alums, and I have a lot of friends that went there. But they do 42 million a year in research. You do 630.
Right,
Cal
and that just keeps growing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Cal, when we looked at those numbers for Cal, because Dr. Kerr, legendary Dr. Kerr, amazing guy, helped lead the creation of the Pac-12 in a lot of ways, did some administrative splits of UC Berkeley in ways that like other universities don't. And so if you put those back together, you get to 4.6 billion in research.
Which is pretty large.
Insane.
The largest D1, wouldn't it be?
So yeah, the next is Hopkins at 3.5.
Yeah, so the rest they're not D1 football programs. The other, the Ivy Leagues.
No one else is close. It goes again. That's the pro forma Cal. So pro forma Cal would be number 1. Actual Cal's like number 20 or whatever. But pro forma Cal's number 1. Then Hopkins. Then I think Michigan and Washington.
Right. Okay.
And then you go down from there.
Yeah, so I was just, I just didn't know much about Big 12. I know they had some medical stuff, but there were nowhere on the lines of some of the West Coast, and that's where.
No, but they're great, and they're great schools, and they have good marketing, and they have devout fans. I mean, that's the thing that frustrates me is that they have people lying to their fans, and that I'm not cool with.
Right, and that's what I've heard from my people. The University of Utah, their number one goal as a university is to reach the height of the medical situation, not football, not history lessons. It's literally medical. I don't know if you know that they have one of the top cancer research and children's hospital.
I know it very well.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal schools.
They're literally on campus, and they're part of the undergraduate. They're part of the university, and you know how much money those two make. I've had to take my children to the primary children's. That's right on campus. I actually
do, because I do. After this, I'm helping teach a leadership class for an undergrad fraternity that's supported by the Huntsman family.
Right. So, which I wish they would stop giving their money to the basketball team and start giving it to the football team. Did you know that? Did they give their money? Yeah, they're big. Well, it's
I know they like the basketball
Center
team.
Is the basketball court. It's named after them. They're the big money donors there. So,
Larry, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Mark.
We got some calls piling up, so
okay,
we want to get to them. But thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody calling. We've got Tony coming up next. Tony, how you doing tonight?
Other Tony, how you doing?
Tony, I have a question actually for you. I'm an ACC football fan. Let's say a team like Miami decides to leave in the future from the ACC, which I don't think happens. In terms of their research, they're a big marine biology research. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, yes, I can hear you guys. In terms of the marine biology aspect of what Miami does for their research, which conference would fit them the best? Would it be the ACC, the Big 12, or the Pac-12?
I mean, anywhere they go. I mean, the thing about it is that's kind of a real specialized question. I think that they'd be fine wherever they go. They're again, Miami.
They have a big
Miami
medical
Canes.
research because we're the leading. Yeah, no, and we have the biggest.
I grew up with family friends coaching in Miami, so I know everything about Miami. You guys are awesome. Again, no matter where you went, it would be strong. And again, you may choose to stay in the ACC because I mean the thing is, like we said, that's a 5-10 years from now point. And the thing about 5 years from now, again, so imagine looking back, right? We're talking about like, 2013, 2018, that wasn't that long ago, but it kind of was at the same time. So, I think they'd be fine no matter what, because it's, the thing about marine biology programs is marine biology programs are real specialized. If they really were worried about marine biology, they join the Big West. And
the Big West? What do you mean?
Yeah. With UC San Diego and
I was
Hawaii.
thinking of this. Let's say.
I mean, that's probably very sportsy. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. For me, as a football fan in general, I think the teams that let's say, the ACC goes after teams from the Big 12. I don't think they bring in UCF because of Florida State and Miami. I think we go after TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor, and Houston. Would those teams fit the philosophy of the ACC in terms of what?
Can you say that just?
Huh? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can
I haven't
hear
been
you,
able to. I don't know if it's my internet or yours.
No.
Okay, can you repeat that, Tony?
I'm a football. This is a question in terms of football in general. Would teams in terms of philosophy of what they're looking for in teams, if they wanted to add, do Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, and Houston fit the ACC?
Again, I don't think anybody's leaving the Big 12 because they have what will become $100 million buyout.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's leaving the Big 12. I don't think anybody's going to write $100 million check to leave the Big 12.
Yeah, and honestly, I hate the idea of super conferences. I'm getting sick and tired of the ACC and the Big Ten dominating. Honestly, the ACC is getting far behind. We only have Clemson in terms of a team that constantly was in the college football playoff, and I'm afraid that we're going to be left behind if teams like Clemson and Clemson leaves. If a team like Clemson leaves to the SEC, that just adds to a higher chance of them, the SEC having more representation. There's not going to be a lot of parity in college football.
Can I ask you a really bad question? Jordan Bowman, close your ears. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say this in the voice of college football. If the ACC lost Clemson and Florida State, it would be fine. Most of my ACC friends are more concerned with what happens in March than what happens in October.
Oh, they don't. They care more about basketball. Basically,
that would be a great discussion to have.
A lot of them.
I need to have a contingent of ACC.
That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother show.
We know the history and tradition, and it's known for basketball. But I would argue the football side. But I totally get it, having covered.
No. You guys know that as a USC grad, like I'm not really sure why people go inside with that round orange thing.
Yeah, it hasn't been too good to you guys.
I think too much stress about because we had a guy named John Wooden across town.
Yeah, that made it tough.
But the thing of it is other Tony, I wouldn't stress about the intricacies of the details of what's happening in 10 years because a lot will change before then.
Yeah, no. The reason why I asked that is because apparently, you don't think even the hardcore, like the SEC lawyers can break what is it called? The grant of rights?
Yeah.
You don't think so?
You guys, if Texas can't get out, nobody can get out.
There you go.
Remember,
Tony,
if Texas could have.
Thank you.
When we think about Texas, just real quick for you guys, remember, if Texas could have declared the Big 12 an abortion and gotten out, they would have. They literally could have passed that law. There's no getting out of it.
Look at this, Tony. We've got a Cal fan joining us. Alex is on the line.
Go Bears.
This should be interesting.
So
Alex, I'm sorry for the Cal slander earlier.
Nah, it's fine, but I'm amused by the Dykes mentions again. And just on that briefly, I don't know if maybe this has been forgotten, but when like especially the first, well, I mean the whole tenure there, we had some of the worst defenses in the history of college football under Dykes, air raid
Yes.
aside. So now that said, after 2016 and 5-7, that's when we had Jake Spavital as our offensive coordinator, and that's when we thought that was our best offense under Dykes, I thought. And at the time, I was like, okay, maybe we can make this work. Just get a lick of defense in there. But then he was canned, and I was shocked by that. And so now we have had the Wilcox tenure, and now Spavital's come back, who I thought maybe should have been given a shot to begin with. After that,
real quick, just because we're doing a realignment show, what do you think about the Cal realignment issues? What are your thoughts?
We have
you are by the way, you are a favorite. You and Gumby are a favorite Cal Bears.
So I told Mark this like his first show after the announcement that the LA schools were gone. I thought the Pac-12 was history, and I still generally think whatever this TV deal is, I think at some point it's still like, I don't think it has much life left. Somebody who, whether it's 1, 2, whatever, I think eventually this whole thing comes undone still. I'm still fairly pessimistic. I'm now starting, like I started to like go back and forth on this, but I now think Cal may be on the right side of things. We probably end up in the Big Ten only because it's what's been mentioned. The largest market available that's kind of up for grabs with the largest concentration of Big Ten alumni is the Bay Area. There are a lot of Big Ten alumni here, like in working with them in San Francisco and around here because, like for those who are academically focused, when you look at grad schools, Berkeley and Stanford, so you kind of have your influx. You also have your outflux to Big Ten schools for that as well. So there's kind of there's a bit of a connection there that may work, but I will be surprised. Like, we'll see if this media deal is awesome for the Pac-10, as far as I'm concerned, if it has some staying power. But because, and I think I also talked with Mark with this briefly, there just aren't a lot of good candidates for further expansion for the Pac-10, 12, whatever you want to call it. Like, we can kind of just keep it as is for now, but long term, I'm just not terribly optimistic. I don't know who you get, and I still think, again, the Big Ten is going to come for some of us at some point. It's going to happen.
It's a really good question, and Alex, you and I have talked about this. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't take Cal and Stanford in already.
Yeah,
I mean, I get Oregon, but I don't get you guys. Like, I honestly thought they would be there, and quite honestly, maybe this is the push that says, hey, get your teams back to relevancy.
And just on that, on us, with us in particular, I know there was a comment or two on this. Right now, we do have some administrative, let's say, behind the scenes conflicts going on. I know there's basketball talk. Right now, it's been bad the last few years here, and some of the priorities going on in Berkeley. Some alumni are, let's say, quite incensed. And as far as football goes, we're just hoping Wilcox, with the Spav hire, that he kind of turns it around. But there are, like someone else mentioned, at Berkeley, we have the ivory tower, not just as a metaphor, but literally it's there. You can see it. Do we have the priorities in place to go into a realignment discussion?
Campanile,
like in a good way? Right now, I don't think so. But again, there's other, like the market itself, there are other factors that may steer us into the Big Ten, but I don't think it's going to be our administration really taking an active role in that. So that's the kind of concern right now with some alumni on that.
Alex, we appreciate your call. Thanks for calling.
I do give credit to your administration.
Mm-hmm. Sorry,
thanks, Alex. Again? Go Bears.
Yep, see ya.
Thanks, Alex.
I said go Bears. All right, we'll see ya.
Tony, our next caller.
Is that the Corey Brada?
Well, I was going to say our next caller has such a presence and a good voice that I've suggested maybe he should start his own YouTube channel. I don't know. I think he's mulling it over. Yes, we got Corey Brada on the line from the Hawkeye of the Storm, everyone.
Really ready for this deep dive into Pac-12 expansion. or I should say Pac-10 expansion. I really don't have anything to say about expansion, boys. I just needed to give you a quick call. I saw you were live on the air, and I just wanted to declare something. We have managed to retain Brian Ferentz despite the many attempts to have him taken and placed in the NFL. Or
humanity.
Yeah, so we have been successful in doing so, and so the world can go on, the earth can keep spinning, Mark. And
well, I don't know if your world's going to continue to spin the same way, but I will say, as was noted on your Twitter, I responded that I was amused by the 25 point per game incentive. Well, that needs to be structured in such a way that it's specifically targeted toward offensive points.
No, it doesn't.
Because if it was
structured
Mark.
toward offensive points, Mark, then that would deflate
half of that.
That would deflate the entire the narrative that Kirk Ferentz has pushed throughout all of this. That it's a convenient stat that doesn't tell the whole story. Just like total offense doesn't tell the whole story, but when you look at total offense combined with red zone efficiency and yards per play and points per game, I also thought it was somewhat humorous, and I'm going to be publishing something here in a little bit about it, but you had to have liked the requirement for Brian to get a bump back up in his pay. Did you see what that requirement was? Not only was it the 25 points per game, which is, again, not even an offensive statistic in and of itself.
Did I see 8 wins?
No, you saw.
Did I actually see 7?
You saw 7 wins. And let me tell you something, Mark. They get to 25 points per game and 7 wins. Guess what happens? Not only does he go back to where he was, he gets a bonus and a raise. Think about that. So Gary Barta, who either has some less than flattering photos of the University of Iowa president in his hands or in his keepsake, or maybe Kirk's got some on Barta. He has basically said to the entire fan base, "Forget you. We don't care. We're going to keep doing us." And I think we knew. I mean, I mentioned that to you last week, Mark, that Brian was restructuring, or that Barta was helping Brian to restructure the contract. So I knew this was coming, but I just needed to give you a quick call because, of course, we're going to be going live tomorrow at 4:30. But for me to have to wait almost 24 whole hours to discuss this with you, I know it's an expansion show, but so I apologize for that. But
not at all, Corey. We appreciate it, and that's Corey Brad from the
Corey,
Hawkeye of the Storm.
I've been told.
Go ahead, Tony.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say I've been reminded by the Trojan alums that as a member of the Big Ten West, I need to shut up about Brian Ferentz and be really glad that he's there.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Tony, I think he's still accepting phone calls. So if you know somebody with the football program, or maybe somebody,
we're glad to have him there.
If you know somebody,
fight on Brian. May you stay forever.
Even the USC defense is going to be made to look good against.
Well, no, I was going to
take it. We'll take it.
I was going to say, if you know, Tony, if you know somebody in the USC athletic department, or maybe know somebody in the USC garbage department or cafeteria that needs a helping hand, I'm sure Brian would be more than happy to make the move. So,
Corey, USC was 124th in the nation in yards per play given up defensively. Now, if that's not a remedy for the Iowa offense, I don't know what is.
Say that again. They were 124th in what?
Yards per play defensively.
Wow. Well, yeah, I think Lincoln Riley is the
anti-Ferentz.
The anti-Kirk, yeah, exactly. So,
yeah.
Well, Corey, we appreciate you being here, and yes, I can't wait to have that conversation with you. We want to make sure everybody's aware. Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm, great Iowa basketball and football coverage there, and Corey and I get together every Tuesday on the Iowa channel at 4:30 Central Time, and we should have a heck of a show coming up this Tuesday. But Corey, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Talk to you tomorrow, Mark. Thanks.
Thanks, Corey. All right, good stuff from Corey. We'll get back on topic here with expansion and realignment talk with Tony Altamore. We appreciate this is just phenomenal. I hope you see, Tony, most of the comments that they come in for the people that truly understand and can appreciate everything that you bring to the table. So
And
thank you so
thanks
much
to you
for
guys.
being here.
Oh, thank you. And just real quick, one last thing. Again, you guys, what we've been talking about here is looking at numbers, looking at data, looking at what makes sense. I'm not purporting to tell you, oh, this is what the insiders say. John Wilner knows better than anybody else, and you guys should really follow the news people who talk directly to athletic directors and presidents. Don't listen to the online Twitter people, especially the ones who lie to you, because they are not going to give you. I mean, if they lied to you repeatedly throughout the fall, told you things that weren't true, and maybe it's not that they were lying, it's they were repeating lies, whatever. Those are not people that are giving you true information. And to the poor Big 12 fans are awesome, but you guys get manipulated a lot by these people, and I think you deserve better.
As Tony outlined kind of the different categories of media right at the top of the show, I'll put myself somewhere in that middle category. I'm just not spewing out crap against the wall, but I'm also not an insider that's got insider information. I plainly state, hey, I'm taking what I know about the football brands, the athletic departments, the TV models, all of that. Then I'm taking Tony's information that he's been so great to provide me and everybody else. And then I take that and I just give an estimate, a possible scenario that seems logical, that seems reasonable, but in no way is that insider information. That's simply Tony's metrics combined with what I bring to the table and kind of making a projection on what could be.
It'll be interesting to see. Who knows?
Tony, again, thank you so much for coming back. I know you kind of back off during the off season for football and get a little bit of rest, which is good for you. But we appreciate you being here. Tony joins us on a regular basis during the season with USC postgame and the Pac-12 chat show as well here on the Voice of College Football. But you see all the hard work he puts into this, and it would go for naught if it wasn't for all the expertise and the insight that he has into the topic as well. So, Tony, thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that people need to know in regards to where to find you or anything that you've got going on?
So you can always find us when we do our Pac-12 chat show here on the Voice of College Football channel and the USC channel. You guys can find me on Twitter at TJ Altimore. That's easy way. Shoot me a note, shoot me a DM. Love to chat with you guys. Love to engage. We love to laugh. Again, no matter who your team is, it's fun because I like, for example, after this, I'm teaching leadership class to kids from a range of 300 different colleges.
Wow. So,
I love to engage with folks from all different fan bases. And, quite honestly, I think the sport is better when everybody's stronger. So hopefully this realignment round works out to make everybody stronger.
We appreciate Corey hanging around just to let everyone know, hey, hit the like button. It means a lot. It doesn't take more than a split second, but it means a lot to the algorithms and the YouTube traffic. So thank you, Corey, for reminding everyone of that. And also, we're joining Corey tomorrow on the Iowa channel for Hawkeyes Live at 4:30 Central Time. We get together with one of Tony's favorites, Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire, coming up later tonight, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on the USC channel as well. Tony, once again, thank you so much for taking your valuable time and laying out the metrics and the strategies for us so we can get a better handle on what truly is meaningful and relevant in what is just a cesspool at times of, rhetoric out there on social media. We appreciate everybody else being here. We will catch you next time here at the Voice of College Football, again on the USC channel in just a few hours at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific.